That was a fear that they would pull out of this, observing role by the NPT and then go even further dark and further underground. But to your point about the intelligence and this is crucial because it's all those years ago this happened in Iraq, and Trump actually said, in his 2016 campaign, Iraq was a big fat mistake. Those are his quotes, and he accused the government of lying about intelligence. And as we know, there were no weapons of mass destruction. So he was very clear that he opposed that. Now we're having another debate on the intelligence about weapons of mass destruction, which is, as you've said and the intelligence says, Iran does not have. But here is what Secretary Rubio said on the Sunday morning show when asked about the intelligence, which is also U.S. intelligence. Here's what he said.
Let me follow up on a phrase you just word, weaponization ambitions. Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I think that question being asked on the media, that's an irrelevant question.
No,
they have
that is the key point in U.S. intelligence assessments. You know that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's
that
not.
The political decision had not been made.
I know that better than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons.
I mean, I've got deja vu all over again. This is precisely the argument that was made as a justification for the war in Iraq, which turned out to be a disaster for the United States and for the region. So are you concerned that your successor, Secretary Rubio, believes that any intelligence is irrelevant? This intelligence, anyway.
I think it's a bigger question than that, frankly. The decision, to the best of our knowledge in the intel community, had not been made, but he is absolutely correct. They have the materials they need.
Right.
And there was a rather alarming report by the IAEA to the effect that they had about 60% level of enrichment, and they have increased the level, of their amount of enrichable material available to be able to make a bomb. So, that creates a cause for worry. It doesn't necessarily create a casus belli, as we know, where you automatically go in. You can show at the table, this is what we know, this is what you're doing. I mean, this is how we negotiated with them for...
Madam ji.
This is News 18.
This is the response, or this is the beginning of a response? Because we're now, we just got word there was 10 missiles fired toward Qatar, one in Iraq. Was there an indication that this is part of an ongoing series of strikes, or did they not specify?
Yeah, well, they're not specifying this at this point in time. They're saying that the response has been launched, but it's a really interesting question because we did hear from a senior Iranian official today saying that they wanted to make the United States pay, and that in total they're gearing up for a conflict both with the United States and Israel that could last up to 2 years, saying that they were prepared for something like that, saying that they believed that they had the public backing for something like that as well. So clearly the Iranians gearing up for what they could believe could be a longer conflict with the United States, and an ongoing conflict that could involve military action as well. Whether or not in response to the strikes on the nuclear facilities, this is a one-off or this is something where the Iranians might launch further strikes as well, at this point in time, they're not saying. But I think that they do believe that right now they are situated in a direct military confrontation, not just with Israel, but also with the United States, Anderson.
All right, Fred Plankton, I appreciate that. Of course, it remains to be seen what Iran's military capabilities still are. Israel, several days ago, said that they had eliminated as many as half of the launchers for ballistic missiles that Iran had. Obviously, Iran has a number of shorter-range missiles as well. Remains to be seen what their capabilities really are. Retired U.S. Navy Commander Kirk Lippold joins us now. He was the commanding officer.
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Christiane Amanpour in London. Iran has fired 11 missiles in total towards American military bases in Qatar and Iraq. This after it vowed to punish the United States as well as keep up its retaliation against Israel, following this weekend's attacks on Iranian nuclear sites. This is where the U.S. tested its biggest bomb ever, the 30,000-pound mop, several of them on Iran's underground nuclear enrichment facility, Fordow. U.S. bombs and missiles also struck two other sites at Natanz and Isfahan. President Donald Trump is declaring it a huge win, saying he's, quote, obliterated those sites. But now his vice president is clarifying those comments, saying they have probably delayed but not destroyed Iran's capabilities. And furthermore, they are not certain about what's happened to Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. The fast move came as a shock to many, especially Iran, after the president opened a 2-week window to make his decision. Technically, he was within those 2 weeks, but much earlier than anybody thought. So is there any room left for a diplomatic way out of this? And what is the end game? Let's get to all of this with the former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who's joining me now from West Newton, Massachusetts, for an exclusive interview. Secretary Kerry, welcome to the program. And of course, so important to have you. And you negotiated the only diplomatic...
As an owner of Walton Goggins goggle glasses, I know how to make slick-looking goggle/glasses. But I have no idea how to make slick social media-styled stuff to sell it. But GoDaddy Aero uses AI not only to create social content out of thin air, it can build a whole social media calendar just for my business. So all I had to do was upload a video of me and my pretty face, and voila. Walton Goggins goggle glasses are great gifts for all guys and gals. Try saying that 10 times fast. Look like you know what you're doing at GoDaddy.com.
What's unfolding. But clearly, Iran had to respond in some way, and they made it clear that they would, and I think the administration anticipated that. The real question now is, what's the impact? How big? Is this a serious effort to counter in a warlike way, or is it a message? Is it a sort of message sender? And then people will work in good faith to try to get to the diplomatic table. I mean, what's important to remember here is there's no military solution to this. This can go on and on. It could get uglier and uglier and more dangerous with greater and greater implications for a global basis. This is very dangerous. My hope is that this is more performative than consequential, and that it will satisfy their need to be able to respond. I think President Trump needs to clearly be very judicious about measuring that and understanding it, and hopefully take the higher ground of getting back to the table for the simple reason that we don't have any visibility anymore. Insight, or the depth of insight that we had with the nuclear agreement that we put in place. I mean, with the nuclear agreement we put in place, we had huge insight as to what they were doing. We had stopped them from developing in whole sectors. We destroyed their plutonium reactor, which they were weeks away from being able to have bomb material. We were able to have, tens of thousands of centrifuges destroyed. We required them to destroy the core of what existed in Fordow, and they did. They dismantled under watchful eyes from the international community. Remember that we brought 5 nations and the United Nations to the table, and we put in place the strongest nuclear agreement that has been agreed to by any countries anywhere in the world since the 1950s or 60s. And so we just need to get to a negotiation in order to be able to really solve this problem.
Okay, so I want to ask you about that, but first I want to ask you one more question about this, because as you said, it was highly telegraphed. Iran has been saying since the U.S. attack that it would have to respond. And some have called for a big response, some of the hardliners inside Iran. But what does, the U.S. obviously has experience with this. When Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Quds force of the IRGC, it was clearly telegraphed that there would be a response from Iran. And from my memory, it did hit a base, but did not cause the damage and death that it could have caused. And that was what people said was a telegraphed, calibrated, face showing face response. Do you think this Trump administration, depending on what is the result of this, do you think him and the people around him would understand that? Or he's promised to retaliate in his speech overnight, Trump, if Iran hits any U.S. targets?
Christian, it's impossible for me to speculate as to exactly what's going on in either the president's mind or the national security team. And I just don't want to do that. I do think people have to be realistic here in understanding what the choices are. Iran is a proud, proud, proud nation. One of the things I learned in my negotiations was the level of pride was just enormous. They also have been committed to the destruction of Israel. That's a cultural, almost religious component of their policy. And so it's very hard to say what exactly is going to bring them back to the table. But I know this, you cannot bomb away the memory of how to make a bomb. You can't bomb away the knowledge that they have developed. You can't bomb away, the broad array of technicians who've been working on this for years, who will go back to work if that's the mission they're given by the leadership of the country. And one of the dangers here is that the more this goes on in a military way, the more power goes to the worst offenders within Iran, the IRGC. And that's not good for anybody.
Well, just a quick, I want you to clarify that, because there's a whole amount of talk now, even Trump is saying, and I don't know whether he's being egged on by the Prime Minister of Israel or the others who have regime change in their mind. But you have just raised a potential result of regime change, that it's not some happy-clappy democracy overnight. It could be a much harder line. And you've just raised the Revolutionary Guard, and others have as well. Do you fear that that is a risk that could happen?
Oh, I think it's an enormous risk. I think it's beyond a risk. It's the greater likelihood, because they're the people with the guns and with the military power. And if you look at Evin prison and the way people have been treated and so forth, we know that these guys haven't been natural good actors in so many ways. I think that what's important here, I mean, none of us who've been involved in this over the years look happily at the choices that Iran has made, feeding the power of Hezbollah, the Houthis, supporting Hamas, and engaging in internal activities that we inherently really find repugnant. But we have to find a way to try to solve the problem. That's what we did with President Obama. We had a lot of choices. We had the MOP back then. In fact, this bomb was developed some time ago, back in 1991, and then refined. It hasn't been used since. But the fact is that we have other options available to us. The model of what happened with the prior agreement is really a significant marker for what needs to happen now. And the Iranians, in fairness here, I mean, I don't like, as I've described, much of the behavior. And I think that what the United States, the military, showed they could do and did the other day is a remarkable operation, and they deserve enormous credit if that's the choice that was made. But that choice has to translate into a diplomatic process. And I don't know if it's possible to restore what was there before. We had massive insight as to what they were doing in their program. Yes, it was very worrisome what the IAEA reported a few days ago. But if we hadn't pulled out of the agreement, and if we hadn't subsequently, taken the positions we've taken with respect to how you negotiate, we could have really come back to a place of reasonable.
Well, then, I want to ask you, this is very...
This has to calm down somehow.
Okay, but about the negotiations and,
Is at the White House. Jeff, what do we know at this point? Well, Becky, we do know, as you and Jeremy were just discussing there, it is too early to say if it is a de-escalation, but it is clear there has been no, at least verbal response from the president to the attack on the Al Udeid base. And we are more than 2 hours on here. Of course, we do expect some type of a comment at some point, but certainly there is a sense that while all eyes were on that, defense officials are telling us that there were no casualties, perhaps even no injuries there. So there is a sense of a pause, at least for the moment, but there's also a sense of a defensiveness, a continued defensiveness from the American president at the actual strike from the weekend and the degree of damage it did to the nuclear program. The president just a short time ago is being defensive in a post on Truth Social. He's saying the sites that were hit in Iran were totally destroyed and everyone knows it. Well, the reality is that is not yet clear. In fact, far from it. The bomb damage is not yet in. Of course, that will take some time to go through all of this. He used the word obliterated over the weekend. His own Defense Department officials said severely damaged, at least at Fordo. So the White House clearly on the defensive posture on that. But Becky, you just get the sense that there is a deep divide among the president's own supporters about the wisdom of a wider war. That would lead me to certainly believe the potential of no response to this. Of course, we will see. Retaliation is something that often does not happen immediately, but you're just getting the sense by no immediate retort from the president that there is a sense of de-escalation here as well.
Yeah, you could argue that this retaliation then on the U.S. base, coming as it did, you rightly point out, just 2.5 hours ago, could or should or might be taken as a win by Donald Trump and his administration. That's certainly what one analyst, one expert in the region suggested tonight. Your thought on that?
It certainly could be. And look, Becky, this is a base that the president was actually just on last month when you and I were both in Doha for the president's trip to the Middle East. He went to Al Udeid and he visited with forces there and troops there and stood, in fact, in front of a stealth bomber and gave his remarks there. So that certainly was on the mind of the White House officials who were watching these come in. But the fact that the missiles were intercepted and the fact that it looks like there was no, at least loss of life or injuries because much of the base had been dispersed, you just have a wonder if there will be a sense of de-escalation. Certainly that is what some of his supporters and officials believe. There's also deep questions now, again, about the urgency of the attack in the first place. A House Democratic leader here is saying, look, there's still been no briefings, no congressional briefings, so we are expecting them tomorrow, a classified briefing. But that is still the central question here when you sort of sort out all the other discussions. How successful was the operation on early Sunday morning in Iran? And what is the state of the nuclear program? And that is something that this White House has not talked much about today, Becky.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jeff, it's always good to have you. Thank you very much.
Great ideas can come from anywhere. With Wix, you decide where they go. Put your ideas into play with AI and watch them shape every aspect of your website. Explore as many layouts and designs as you want. Then zoom in and dictate the mood and vibe. And when it all comes together,